We're back in Scandinavia for today's League Lowdown and the Nordic nation of Norway. A country that boasts some of the most beautiful towns and cities you might find anywhere in Europe, from the nation's capital of Oslo to west coast gems such as Bergen, Stavanger, and a little further north, Trondheim, and the magical Lofoten Islands. This is a nation where the art makes you want to scream, where the weather makes you want to ski, and the government makes you declare your income for the rest of the country to see. Norway is of course a nation of Viking ancestry, of cruise line destinations like fjords and glaciers, as well as being the home to some truly spectacular wildlife, both in the seas and on the land. This is where the hotels are built from ice and the skies come alive at night, and where football stadiums are set against a stunning backdrop. And football is of course the reason why we're here. So let's look at how the leagues work, as well as the clubs you could manage, in the League Lowdown Guide to Norway. Welcome back to the League Lowdown. This time we are in Norway, and whenever we have the opportunity to use the expertise of somebody that knows this country well, we use it, and this time we've enlisted the help of Espen from Passion for FM, one of the Football Manager community's leading FM bloggers. You will of course find links in the description to the Passion for FM website, but without further ado, let's have a look at the league structure in Norway. So when you start a game of Football Manager in Norway, you are given the choice of what year you'd like to start your game in. Because they run a summer league, you can either start your game in Norway at the start of the 2020 season, or fast forward to the beginning of the 2021 campaign. You can load up 4 tiers of Norwegian leagues at the start of the game, but you can only pick a club from one of the top 3. The 4th is just there as a parachute in case you get relegated. In the top division, you'll find 16 sides. They play each other home and away, creating a 30-game season. You've got the top team winning the title. You've got the bottom 2 getting relegated, and the team that finishes 3rd from bottom have to go through a play-out to see whether they get relegated down to the 2nd tier, or in Norway as they call it, the 1st division. Only the top 2 teams there are getting automatically promoted. Then the teams 3rd to 6th go into their own playoffs to see who wins the right to play that team from the division above that finished 3rd from bottom. They have a similar structure for their relegation places down there as well. The bottom 2 automatically getting relegated. That 14th place team having to go into a playoff against a team from the 3rd tier. Now the 3rd tier is split across 2 different groups. You've got 14 teams in each, creating a 26-game season. If you finish top in either of those 2 groups, you get automatic promotion. The 2 teams that finish 2nd play against each other, and the victor of that tie goes and plays the team that finished 14th in the division above to see who will be in that 1st division next season. So that's how the league structure works in Norway, but I think it's time to have a look at some of the clubs that you might like to take charge of. It's always nice to start a league lowdown by looking at some of the most dominant clubs in a country, and in Norway, well, there are 2 clubs in particular at the moment that always seem to be tussling at the top of the table, and one of those has won more titles than any other club in the nation, and that is of course Rosenborg BK. They come from the northern town of Trondheim over there on the coast. They play in the 21,000 Lerkendal Stadium, and as well as dominating Norwegian football for the last 3 decades or so, they've also had occasional forays into the group stages of the Champions League, as well as even making the quarter-finals of the competition back in 1997, beating AC Milan during that little run. Now, this club has won more than double the titles of their next closest challenger, 26 of them in all. They won it 13 seasons straight between 1991 and 2004. And they've also won it in 2015, 16, 17 and 2018 as well. Not been so successful over the last couple of seasons. Some new clubs have emerged to challenge them at the top of the table. But when you add those 26 league titles to 12 Norwegian Cup victories as well, you can see why this is the dominant force when it comes to Norwegian football. They've got pretty good facilities up there in Trondheim as well. Great training facilities, great youth facilities, exceptional youth recruitment as well. So expect it to be a little bit of a conveyor belt of talent in your Norwegian game as well. But over the last decade, perhaps, a second force has definitely emerged in Norwegian football at the top of their table. And that club is Molde, another team like Rosenborg from the western coast of Norway. They don't have anywhere near as many trophies as their Trondheim rivals, but what makes them part of Norway's Big Two is how recently those trophies have come. They have all come since 2011 when Molde won their first title, and they added to it in 2012, 2014 and 2019 as well. Famously, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer guided the team to 2 of those titles. He had a second spell in charge shortly before their 2019 title season, before he moved to Manchester United to take up the reins at Old Trafford. They've also won 4 Norwegian Cups, one of those slightly earlier being in the 90s, but you'll see that the other 3 have also been in the last 15 years as well. So over the last decade, Molde have certainly positioned themselves as part of Norway's Big Two clubs. Just like the team from Trondheim, they also have pretty decent facilities if you take charge of them. Great training facilities, great youth facilities, and exceptional youth recruitment as well. So if you take charge of either of those 2 teams, the task is simple. Overthrow your nearest rival and establish yourself as the dominant force in Norwegian football. But not everybody wants to take charge of a club that is already pretty established at the top of the national game. So let's have a look at some of those 2 clubs' nearest challengers. So let's start our look at the challengers with the reigning champions, Bodø/Glimt, a team that from a town even further north than both Rosenborg and Molde. This club are based inside the Arctic Circle. They won their first title in 2020 and became the first team from in the Arctic Circle to win the Norwegian Premier Division. They have quite a modest little stadium, but they are a club that has been upwardly mobile over the last couple of years. Added to their first league title last season, they've won the cup 2 times as well. And Glimt, or Flash, if we translate that into its English equivalent, are a team that might suffer over the next year, because when one of the smaller clubs wins the title in Norway, often they find their best young talent is then poached from other clubs, and that has already started happening at Glimt. But if you like the idea of taking charge of a forward-thinking club that were the reigning champions last season, well, Bodø/Glimt are definitely an interesting challenge. But maybe you fancy taking charge of a capital club, and Norway is one of those interesting nations where the leading teams don't actually come from the biggest city in the nation. But Oslo's leading team right now are Vålerenga, who play in the decently sized 16,500 capacity stadium. This is a club that has won the Premier Division 5 times, although they've not won it for over a decade now. They've also got 4 cups in the cabinet as well. This is a club, by the way, that does have a fierce rivalry with another team from Oslo, who have now been demoted all the way down to the 4th tier of Norwegian football. Lyn used to be up there in the Premier Division as well. A decade or so ago, they were nurturing the likes of John Obi Mikel, but they have fallen on hard times, largely because of financial reasons. They've won the Premier Division 2 times themselves, but notably, they've won the Norwegian Cup on 8 occasions. But you can't take control of them at the start of the game. They're in the 4th tier. But maybe with an editor from the Steam Workshop, you might be able to take charge of Lyn. But back to Vålerenga. This is a club that has nurtured the likes of John Carew, leading striker, now actor, who started his career at lower league Lørenskog, but moved to Vålerenga when he was a teenager, and later went on to play for Premier League clubs like Stoke and Aston Villa. The facilities are not too bad, as you'd expect perhaps for a capital club, We've got excellent training facilities, excellent youth facilities, exceptional youth recruitment as well. So you can see, if you like the idea of taking charge of a club that might not have been the most successful, but certainly has the infrastructure to dominate, well, Vålerenga are an interesting proposition. But there might also be a club from Norway's second biggest city that might also interest you. And that club are Brann, or if we translate it, Fire Bergen, from the city on the coast. There's 250,000 people living in Bergen. They've got a 17,000 capacity stadium. And this is often a club that is up near the top of the table, and many pundits tip them for a good season. Certainly during the last campaign, they flattered to deceive, and they're probably a club so big that they really should have more trophies in their cabinet. They've won the Norwegian Premier Division on 3 occasions, one of them in 2007, but you're going back to the 1960s to find the other 2. And they've also got a smattering of cup wins in Norway as well, 6 in total, the most recent of those being in 2004. This is a club that has probably got the fan base and the infrastructure to achieve a little bit more than it currently is. Good training facilities, good youth facilities, good youth recruitment as well, and certainly a passionate support base. If you like the idea of taking charge of a club that's a challenger but hasn't been at the top of the table for a number of years now, then Brann might be another team that you want to investigate. But it's often interesting to take charge of the team in a nation that are the oldest remaining club in that country. And if you do that in Norway, well, you will find yourself in the Premier Division. The club in question are Odd, who were founded in 1894, making them the oldest remaining club in Norwegian football. They've got a 12,000 capacity stadium, not too shabby by Norwegian standards. And they may not ever have won the Norwegian Premier Division, but they do have the most cup wins alongside Rosenborg of any team in Norway. They've got 12 in total, the most recent being in the year 2000, and they won it 11 times during the previous century as well. So if you like the idea of trying to take Norway's oldest football club to their first Premier Division title, well, Odd are a wonderful opportunity to do just that. But there are some other challenges out there in Norway that might just prove attractive. If it's sleeping giants you're after, well, the Norwegian second division, which is the third tier out there in Norway, has some brilliant clubs for you to take charge of. What about Norwegian football's second most successful team after Rosenborg? That team is Fredrikstad, who you may not have heard of because a lot of their success comes a little bit further back in history, but they've won the Norwegian Premier Division title on 9 different occasions. The last of them was in 1961. But you'll find a little bit more recent cup success, 11 Norwegian Cups in total as well, just 1 behind both Rosenborg and Odd. The most recent of those was in 2006. This is a team that's been in the Premier Division in Norway for much of its history, now finds itself down in the 3rd tier. Maybe you could be the manager that restores Fredrikstad to their former glory, but they're not the only sleeping giant playing at that level. Another of them are one of the teams from Oslo, who are Skeid, who might not have as many league titles as Fredrikstad, but in terms of cup wins, they are one of the grandest old names in Norwegian football. They have won the Premier Division, just 1 sole title in 1966, but it's those 8 cup wins that they are perhaps more famous for. If you like the idea of taking charge of a team with a great history and bringing it into the top division and maybe trying to take on Vålerenga to be the top team in Oslo, well, Skeid are another interesting proposition. But the sleeping giants just keep on coming in Norwegian football. This is Moss FK, who got a 10,000 capacity stadium and are widely perceived to be too big a club to be playing down there in the 3rd tier, having spent large portions of their history in the Premier Division, or certainly bouncing between the top 2. They've won the Premier Division once, although it was back in the 1980s, and they've won the Cup in the 1980s as well. This is a team that could comfortably be restored to the Norwegian Premier Division, but are you the manager that can take them to the summit of the Norwegian game? If we dip into Group 2 of Norway's 3rd tier, we'll find another club that are maybe worthy of mention, although not strictly a sleeping giant. The club in question are Bryn FK, who play in a rather modest 4,000 capacity stadium, but they are a professional club. They've played some Premier Division football, although they've never won the Premier Division title. They do have a Norwegian Cup in their cabinet though, winning that competition in 1987, but they also have another accomplishment of note. If we look at the leading light of Norwegian football, one Mr. Erling Haaland, we'll find that Brian is the club that he started his development at before they sold him to Molde for £88,000. The fact that one of Europe's top marksmen can start out at a club that's now playing in the third tier of Norwegian football certainly gives us an interesting save idea that we might be able to pursue. If you want to try and create the next Erling Haaland at Brian, well, you're going to have to do so with some quite modest facilities. They've got adequate training facilities, below average youth facilities, average academy coaching, and only adequate youth recruitment. It certainly would be a challenge to try and bring them to the top of the Norwegian game, but certainly a challenge that some people might find interesting. But if you're looking for a club that is a little bit different, how about we head to the far north of Norway, the most northerly club that you can take charge of in a Norwegian Football Manager adventure. Possibly, you'd have to do your research, the most northerly football club you can take charge of in any of the leagues playable on Football Manager, and that club is Alta, who play most of their games during the season at an indoor arena due to the adverse weather conditions they have up there in Finnmark. It only holds 1,250 fans, but this is a club that has played at a higher level than it is playing at now, and it does also have a familiar name on its playing staff. This is a 39-year-old Morten Gamst Pedersen, who, over the last couple of years, has been playing at Tromsø in the Norwegian Premier Division, but Tromsø have now been relegated, and Gamst Pedersen has moved to Alta to try and continue his ambition of playing into his 40s. You can see the physicals might not be quite what they were with young Mr. Pedersen, but certainly the technical ability is still there, and he is wowing crowds at Alta's indoor arena. If you like the idea of taking charge of the most northerly club in Norway, well, Alta are definitely an interesting team, and if you can take them to the top of Norwegian football, well, that really is an achievement. So that wraps up the League Lowdown guide to Norway, a country that may not have much by way of European success, and certainly playing a summer season doesn't make that feat any easier to achieve. But maybe you like the challenge of trying to take a team from a country that's yet to win a major European honour and trying to add that to your Football Manager CV. We will see you next time when we're going to make another country the focus of our next League Lowdown.